parasites that cause African sleeping sickness. They're both members of the large Trypanosoma brucei family, and they're called Trypanosoma brucei gambiense and Trypanosoma brucei rhodesiense. They're transmitted by the painful bite of the tsetse fly and cause a mystical illness that casts its victims into a deep slumber, kind of like Sleeping Beauty. So with that, let's set our scene. This is a story of a familiar maiden who set off on an exciting African adventure only to fall ill. We'll set her up in a lavish tent, beautifully appointed with a large 4-poster bed and a gilded bedside table. In the bed, we'll place our sleeping princess, who's in a deep slumber, of course, to remind you of sleeping sickness. On the bedside table is a teapot and a cup of tea, and look carefully, and in the tea you'll see a tiny fly, a tea fly. Actually, a tsetse fly, which is the vector for these parasites. Trypanosoma brucei are endemic to western and southeastern Africa, as the two names might suggest, Gambia and Rhodesia. That's an old name for Zimbabwe. So over her head we'll place a map with pins on Gambia and Rhodesia, it's an old map, to remind us of Gambiense and Rhodesiense. So what's the story here? Well, the tsetse fly was sitting on the edge of her teacup and bit her when she took a sip, sending her into a coma. So now that we have our victim, let's get into the symptoms of the parasite. So after biting, the parasites move from the blood to the lymph nodes. So we'll have her wear a pearl necklace, and her nightgown will have ruffles around the shoulders to represent cervical and axillary lymphadenopathy. She's also looking kind of feverish. And not only do people get fevers, they get recurrent fevers. The rolling, undulating hills that you see outside of the door of her tent represent the undulating or recurrent fevers, although the term undulating fever is really a buzzword for brucellosis, not to be confused with Trypanosoma brucei. The symptoms also give you a clue as to where the parasites dwell. Sleeping sickness points to the problems in the CNS and spinal fluid. Lymphadenopathy is obviously for the lymph nodes, and fevers are telling you that it's in the blood. Thus, for diagnosis, we'll have a trickle of blood from her fingertip to remind you that you'll see trypanosomes in the blood smear. The stuffed goat on her bed is our recurring symbol for anything that ends in mastigote, and in this case, they're trypanosomes. And you can also test the lymph nodes or spinal fluid to see these trypanosomes as well. A couple more things about these parasites. Take a look outside the tent. We're drawing these multicolored tents scattered across the grounds. Each one of them is a little different, with an interesting combination of colors and patterns. These represent the parasite's variable surface glycoproteins, which, as you may have guessed, undergo constant antigenic variation, thereby evading the host's immune system and enabling chronic infection, hence the recurrent fevers. Another fact about these parasites is that they're motile with a single flagella. So to illustrate this, we've drawn in a single pink ribbon in the beauty's hair. Kind of looks like a flagella, right? So this is to remind you that they have a single flagella. So now you might be thinking, who's this Prince Bruce fella? Well, here he is, coming in through the entrance of the tent. It's Prince Bruce, and he's come to save the day. He has in his hands a life-saving serum and a bar of soap. The bar of melisope for melisopredol, and a bottle of serum for Ceramin. These are the two treatments for a Trypanosoma brucei infection, and they're pretty unique. I guess he's intending to wake her from her sleep with the serum, followed briskly by a sponge bath with melisope. The Ceramin will treat the peripheral bloodborne disease, and the melisopredol will treat the parasite that's penetrated the CNS. To remember the Ceramin treats the peripheral blood, think Ceramin for the serum. Also note that Trypanosoma brucei is one of the few parasites that penetrate the CNS, and that the few treatments that exist have a side effect profile that's really highly toxic. Well, hopefully these treatments will save our sleeping maiden, and she can live a decent life with her prince. You can see why Disney didn't really like our version of the Sleeping Beauty. Well, that wraps up these parasites. You deserve a quick nap, and then come back and watch some more videos.